everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. Rachel Rothman here from Nutrition in Bloom, and I am so excited to be joined today by Debbie Zeichner. She is just an amazing person. She is a parenting coach, a mindfulness facilitator, and a dear friend of mine as well. And I invited her to join me today because I feel like when it comes to feeding, there is so much more than the food and what we offer. And Debbie, I'll hear from you in a minute, but there are so many behaviors at the table and just different things that are going on when it comes to feeding. So I'm so happy to have you to share some of your wisdom and to talk with us about and give us some tips and strategies. So thank you so much for being here.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so Debbie and I first met each other maybe 3 years ago. We were both speaking at the same event, and I feel like we just connected right away. Our approaches were so similar in terms of kind of how we function and the recommendations and the strategies that we teach. And since then, I will say that you have been so helpful in my personal journey as well with my two girls. So you are always have so much advice just when it comes to parenting, because it's really hard to parent. So I would love for you to just start by telling us a little bit about what you do, how you help parents, and your family as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as I said, thank you again. It's so wonderful to be here. So really, I would say I got into this work because I was a busy, overwhelmed, anxious, stressed out new mom who had no clue what I was doing. And the ironic part about it was that I was in the field of psychology. I mean, I was a therapist, I was a social worker, I was working with tons of parents and families. And, my thing I always say is that I was the perfect parent before I had kids. Like, I thought I'd have it all figured out. I thought I would be so calm and so patient. Then I had my family and it all went out the window. And so I felt like I had a lot of learning to do. So my work is really born out of just my own stressful and challenging experiences. I have two very strong-willed kids. I have a 14-year-old son and an 11-year-old daughter. And honestly, they are my biggest teachers. I learn from them every day. They're constantly reminding me the areas in which I need to grow. So that's how I got into this. And I started taking some parenting courses. I became certified to teach a couple of parenting courses. And my philosophy is really rooted in positive discipline and positive parenting. So that's my approach and philosophy. And I'm just here to really kind of offer my knowledge and my experience and really just support parents wherever they are. We're all in such different stages of this journey. And so I think it's really just about knowing that wherever we are, it's okay. And that wherever we are, typically it's challenging, and that there's support available. So that's really what my passion is just supporting parents each and every step of the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that. And I talk a lot about that too, that we're all at a different journey, and nobody's journey looks the same. So it's so important to really start where you're at initially versus starting on somebody else's journey. So awesome. Thank you for sharing. And I know we'll talk at the end, but you have some awesome offers coming up that can definitely help parents from a whole parenting perspective. And I'll link to all of those as well.
Thank you.
So I wanted to start a little bit by talking a little bit about like the why this is happening. And I think that a lot of us parents, we're in the trenches, we're seeing some of these behaviors. And, I see it when it comes to feeding. So kids throwing food, kids getting up from the table and running away, standing on chairs, just doing all of these things. And sometimes as a parent, it can feel like they're just trying to get to me. They're doing this on purpose. But can you talk a little bit about kind of the why that these things are occurring right now?
Yeah. So really it's knowing. And the first thing is to be able to remind ourselves that our kids aren't out to get us, that it's not about us, that it's not personal, and that really, children act childish. That's the bottom line. Kids act childish. And I think what happens is that we develop and have these developed expectations as to what behavior should look like. My child should be able to sit still for a 1 hour meal. My child shouldn't, my child should keep their food on their plate at all times. And there's a lot of these shoulds, and that's how we sort of know that we're getting locked into these expectations. And the difficulty is that so often those expectations are completely unrealistic. And yet the thing is that we never really stop to question them. We never really stop to ask ourselves, is it realistic for me to expect my toddler to sit at the table for an hour, even 45, 30 minutes? Is that realistic? Or do they developmentally have a need to move their body? So sitting still isn't the easiest thing for them. And maybe there's something that I can do that can support them in learning how to sit for longer periods of time. So I think it's just understanding that, just like we're all at different stages in our parenting, our kids are all at different stages in terms of their development. And some kids, depending on their temperament, some kids are able to sit for very long periods of time. In fact, I have parents tell me, oh my God, my daughter's been eating forever and like, we're ready to go. And she's still eating and dining leisurely. And I'm like, God, that's such a beautiful thing. And at the same time, I understand we need to move on, right? But so every kid is just different in terms of their temperament and their need. And there is that need to move. There's also that need to feel a sense of autonomy, a sense of control. And so when you're sort of put at the table, many, especially young ones, are strapped in, right? Their feet are dangling. There's no sort of support underneath the feet. I've been talking to a lot of OTs about this recently. There's no even support under the feet. So it's sort of like it's going against a child's developmental need to feel in control and also release some of that pent up energy that they have in their body. And then so when they kind of squirm and they can't sit still or they want to move, then we get really angry and upset. And that's where, so if we can start with, just understanding where our child is developmentally, understanding what's normal and typical for that age and stage of development, is it completely normal, or what can I expect from my child depending on what their age is? I think if we can start there and sort of be mindful of that self-talk that is going in our own mind in those moments, it can really help the way in which we then approach our child. Because if I'm telling myself, oh my God, what's wrong with him? Not this again. I can't handle this anymore. This is ridiculous. When is this ever going to, if I'm telling myself that, I'm getting all worked up, I'm probably not going to be able to approach my child in a very calm, patient, and compassionate way. If I'm able to tell my child, or tell myself, if I'm able to tell myself, okay, this is happening. Okay, my child's acting like a 3-year-old because she has a 3-year-old or 4-year-old or 2-year-old. Okay, I can handle this. I'm most likely going to approach my child in a much different way. So as I always say, and as you know, just from us talking, it really starts here. It starts here. It's not our child that is the problem. It's really just kind of being able to do just some adjustment. And those expectations that we have, that's been passed down from our own childhood. It's passed down from our culture. It's passed down from our environment. So it's not like we're doing anything wrong. It's just that it's recognizing where we're starting from and also recognizing, where we might need to sort of make some adjustments in terms of what's realistic and what might not be realistic.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I think you touched on so many important points there. I think number one, just those expectations that we have. And I think that sometimes when it comes to feeding, we have these expectations surrounding mealtime, but then also how much our child should be eating. So it's like these expectations about what they should be doing. And then it's like, wait, my child needs to be eating this certain amount. And we're placing so much pressure on ourselves to have it go a certain way. And I totally agree with you that when we can let some of that go, we're just kind of coming in with a different mindset. And the next question I'm going to ask you, I was going to wait till the end, but you kind of touched on this about how we are coming to the table. And I think that I know you do so much of this in your mindfulness training, and I don't know if you're able to kind of give us just a couple tips or summarize this a bit, but I know as a parent, if I am stressed, my daughter feels it, everything just becomes much harder. And myself, I've been working on like self-kindness and mindfulness for myself, and it's definitely helping. But I guess I'm just wondering if you have tips of kind of how we can start to get to that place where we are just approaching meal times, or even just parenting in general, from like shifting our perspective a little bit.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, and I think, again, it goes back to being able to look at those expectations, so that's the first step. And I think it is being able to give ourselves some grace, treat ourselves with some kindness and compassion, especially in those moments when mealtime is really stressful. And I think once we can, as you said, let go of some of these expectations and bring the bar down a bit and be okay with the as is. Right. So Dr. Shafali, who talks about like just accepting the as isness of a situation. So this is how it is right now. And I think what's so important to know is that these are moments in time. It doesn't mean that just because your child isn't able to, let's say, sit still at a meal or isn't eating, green and red vegetables, it doesn't mean that it's going to be like that forever. And I think that it's really easy to go to that place like, oh my God, if I don't nip this in the bud, then they're never going to sit still. We're never going to be able to go to a restaurant. And we start to catastrophize, right? We start to think the worst, and we find ourselves in this rabbit hole of negative thinking. Again, that's what affects our child. So if we can become mindful of just the thought, so even when we start to notice within our bodies that we're feeling stress, right? So we know that we're feeling stress, or one of the signals is if you can just do a check-in. Okay, what am I feeling right now? Like it's really rare that we actually, as parents, especially busy moms, stop to say, how do I feel? And what do I need right now? Right. And sometimes, like, even just during the day, if I just stop to check in, I notice that my breathing is kind of shallow. I notice that my shoulders are tense, that my jaw, for me, I get tension in my jaw. So if I can simply release my jaw, if I can take a breath, like it's just a way of grounding us. Mm-hmm. Right. So then I'm able to recognize that, okay, this is just a moment in time. It doesn't mean it's always going to be like this. And I can speak from personal experience. My daughter, when she was younger, she's now 11. When she was very young, she ate nothing. I mean, she was like, all she'd eat is goldfish, and it was so stressful. And I remember we used to battle over it. And eventually I just had to let it go and let it be and recognize that and remind myself, eventually with my help and guidance, right? Eventually she will eat more. Now things are so different. And I look back and think, oh my God, you should have seen yourself when you were a kid. So I think even if we can just, and that's a way of giving ourselves compassion, right? That I'm not the only one who goes through this. Many children struggle with this. Many parents struggle with this. So just, you think even first and foremost, being able to tell yourself, okay, I'm not alone. I know I'm not the only parent who goes through this, right? Because there's whole fields on this, right? So that's how we know millions of books written on this, blog articles written on this. So I think it's starting from that place of kindness towards ourselves, because that's how we will then be able to show up with our children with much more patience, right? So if we can have more patience with ourselves, going back to what you said, recognizing how much pressure we're putting on ourselves, kind of take that off. And when I work with parents, around this, and I say, just take the pressure off of yourself. Like, they will do X, Y, Z. They will be able to sit still one day, or they will be able to eat those green vegetables one day. It's okay. They will get there. It's like, oh, I don't have to work so hard. I'm like, no, you don't. You don't, right? So, and then, as you always talk about with parents, then it just kind of brings up that whole division of responsibility and knowing what's ours and what we hold on to, and then what's really our child's, remembering that they have that need to feel a sense of autonomy and a sense of control over their environment. And these are always the biggest areas, like the three biggest areas: eating, sleeping, and toilet training. I mean, those are the only areas over which kids have complete control. We cannot make them eat. We cannot make them sleep. We cannot make them use the bathroom. And that's where they hold on the tightest, because they want that control. And it's important that we find healthy ways of giving that to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was one of the things when I first took one of your parenting classes like 3 years ago. You said those three things and you talked about that, and that's always stuck with me. And I now share that with my clients too, that a lot of times when it comes to feeding and some of these things we're seeing, it's not about the food. It's about like all of these other things that's going on. And we have to find ways to work with our child instead of working against them, because then we're just going to butt heads with them and nobody wins. Or, meal times are more stressful. So yeah, I love everything you shared there. And I think that idea of just like checking in with ourselves, it's something that sounds like so simple, but can just have such a wonderful effect at like certain times of the day. So thank you so much for sharing that tip.
Well, and just really quickly, the only other thing I'll say too, along with everything that you're saying, is that, like you said, when we're doing this and mealtime is stressful, who ever feels like eating in those moments when you're feeling so much stress and anxiety? It's like everything shuts down.
Right.
So we have to know that. So, and I know that this is, so much of the work, the beautiful work that you do with parents is creating those peaceful meal times. And when we're able to do that, then it's like we open up the door to our kids wanting to sit for longer periods of time, wanting to try new foods. So it really does kind of that energy. We really do set the tone.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, I totally agree with that. So those are some wonderful tips that we can kind of take with ourselves and just some things to kind of think about from our perspective. And I was going to say, but I'm going to say, and then we have the behaviors that we do need to set limits on. And one of the things that I hear you talk a lot about is the idea of connection before correction. And I would love if you could just kind of talk us through that and talk a little bit about how you can really apply that at meal times.
So, there are these challenging behaviors, as you said, that typically show up. Some of the ones that I hear parents talk about all the time is, throwing things, or wanting to watch a show at mealtime and not being able to transition from show into eating, or not being able to not have that. So, really what connection is about, it's about empathy. It's about validation and acknowledgement. So it's recognizing where our child is in the moment, rather than coming at them with logic. And that's one of the biggest mistakes that I see parents make. I mean, I made the same mistake myself all the time, which is why things weren't working so well in my house, is that we tend to go to this place of logic. And what I mean by that is we'll say things like, there's no throwing food. You can't throw food. The food is for eating. Do you know there's a lot of people who are hungry out there who don't have food and they're starving, right? We kind of go to this logical place that typically our kids, especially our young kids, they're not there. And they're not there developmentally. They cannot take in and process A, so many of those words, and B, just even those big concepts, right? So, sometimes it's the connection might look like, I know you really want to throw your food. I know that seems like so much fun. And food stays on our plate. Or let me give you something else to play with. So it's really just about acknowledging the need that your child has, acknowledging the emotions that are probably underneath the behavior itself. So in positive discipline, we talk about, all behaviors of communication. So, when your child's constantly throwing food, what is that behavior trying to tell you? Are they not hungry? Are they bored? Do they not like it? Or are they just curious and they just want to see what happens? Right? So it's also figuring out what that behavior is trying to communicate and how else can we meet the need. So if we go straight into logic, or straight into consequences, or straight into punishment for that behavior, then we miss out on an opportunity. We miss out on a teachable moment, because once we come at our child with, let's say, a consequence or a punishment or our anger, their brain shuts down. And they cannot take in any of those beautiful lessons that we want to teach them. So that's really what connection is about, is connecting with your child, seeing your child, helping your child feel seen and understood. Yeah. Then once you're calm and your child's calm, then you can talk about what needs to happen. And in those moments, as you heard me say in that example, I can still set my limit.
Right.
And in positive discipline, we do it in a way that's kind and firm at the same time. So it's not, oh, sweetie, no problem. You can throw your food. That's fine. It's not that. And it's not stop throwing your food or you're getting up from the table and going in your room. It's really sort of it's finding that balance in the middle. So it's recognizing the need and then still being able to say what the expectation is. It's just doing it in a way that honors your child in terms of showing kindness and respect to your child, as well as showing that kindness and respect to yourself.
Yeah. And I mean, I love that. And I think that part of that, then it goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning, where we have to be taking care of ourselves and be showing up in a place where we are in that calm state. Because if we're not, it's so hard to get to that place where we can show up with kindness. I'd love to ask you about something that happened at our mealtime last night and find out how you would handle this. So, and now as I'm thinking about it, I was probably in a place of stress and just, coming to the table after a long day, being with my two kids all day. And my daughter asked me to get more water for her. And she's 5.5. She's very capable of going to the refrigerator, getting more water. And it took me a minute to think, well, how do I set a respectful limit? Do I say, do I go and say, okay, I'll get you more water? Do I make her go do it, which could lead into a tantrum? And it just, there's these certain situations where how do we figure out what am I trying to say? Like, what's worth our kind of like setting the limit versus doing it? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, and I think part of the answer is very general. So part of the answer is it depends on the family, right? Because some families have very strong values in terms of this is how it is, and other parents don't care as much. So I guess it would depend on a few things. It would depend on in what tone. Like, so I'm sensing that there was a certain tone that she used with you that maybe triggered you.
It triggered me. Absolutely.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So, that's something that is important for us to look at first and foremost, is to say, why am I getting so upset about that? Right. And it's going to go right back to those expectations. So why am I getting so upset about this? What is it about that upset me? Right. Why am I having such a strong reaction? Because your reaction to that may be very different than another parent who may not even have thought twice about it. Right. So, and that comes from how children what we tell ourselves about how children should behave, how they should act. And not to say there's anything wrong with that, but we just want to recognize where we're starting from. And so she said it to you. How did she say it to you? Just give me an idea.
It was probably like, I need more water. It wasn't even like, or like, get me more water or something. And we definitely talk about, using kind words and kind language, but I guess my thought was, and sometimes what I'll do is say, like, right now I'm enjoying my dinner. So you can either get it yourself or you can wait until I've, for a couple minutes and I finish and then I can get you more. But it definitely, when you said triggers, that was exactly my thought as well. It was like already a trigger because of like everything that's gone on, but like there's certain times where she does trigger me in that way with like the demands. So yes.
Right. And so I think it's also being able to remember. So first you're able to then check yourself, right? Noticing when you're getting upset, because then we have a tendency to sort of respond in kind, right? And then we're not modeling the very behavior that we want to see. So it's first kind of being able to check yourself, because my guess is, and probably as you were looking back, probably as you look back on it now, her intention, my guess is, wasn't to be rude and demanding and make you get up. I mean, she was probably like, I'm thirsty and I don't have a lot of impulse control and I'm just going to tell you what I need. Right.
Absolutely.
So, in those options, in those situations, you have a couple of options. One is exactly what you did. What you did is to offer her some options. Sounds like you're really thirsty right now. I totally get it. I know eating can make us thirsty, and right now I'm enjoying my food. So your choices are to go and get some water yourself, or I can help you in a minute. It's up to you. You decide. So that's one option that you have. Another option that you have is to say something like, sounds like you're really thirsty. Okay, I hear you. Would you like to try that again? Is there another way that you'd like to say that to me? Can we have a do-over? Right. So I love the concept of trying again and having do-overs, because the reality is we all make mistakes, right? We all make mistakes, right? So how many times do we react to our kids in a way that we wish we hadn't reacted to them? Right. And that's a beautiful opportunity to then focus on repair. When I spoke to you in that way, that wasn't respectful. and I apologize. And next time I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, right? Letting our kids know that, you know, we're not perfect either. So that's another option that you have, is to invite a do-over, or would you like to try that again? And not in a condescending way, just in a little like, and she's old enough, right? Like, it's almost like it's bringing it to her attention without shaming her.
Yeah.
Right? Because your other option is to say, hey, how dare you speak to me like that?
Right.
Quite shaming. The other option to say, sounds like you're really thirsty, and I'm wondering if you want to try that again, and maybe a different voice. Yeah. And then it might get her, oh, sorry, but, you know, and then it even like can stimulate some laughter, and, you know, and then you can talk about it later. You know, in the future, when you feel thirsty, let's figure out what your choices are. So you always have an opportunity to go back later and talk to her about what her options are, how she can ask for it. It's just typically not in the heat of the moment when you notice that you're triggered.
Yes. Yeah. I love that. And that's something that you taught me just in parenting as well, is taking those situations out of the situations and having those conversations when it isn't in the heat of the moment, when it's not like two people fighting. So, yeah, that's an excellent tip. Thank you. And I think the other thing I just want to say with that, you know, it's so dependent on the child's age too, and where they are developmentally, you know, because my daughter, she's 5.5, we've done a lot of this stuff. It's going to be so different how I approach her versus like a 2-year-old who's asking for something. So I think that's always just so important to keep in mind too, where they are developmentally too.
Yes. And if that was your 2-year-old, you could say, yes, I hear you'd like some water. Can you say, Mommy, may I please have some water? Right? Because a 2-year-old doesn't yet have the skills, and needs a lot of repetition, and needs to hear what it sounds like to, you know, what does it sound like to get your needs met appropriately, right? And what does it sound like to get your needs met respectfully? So that's an opportunity that we have to model, you know. But as you said, with your 5.5-year-old, you don't need to say it like that, because she knows, she just might need that gentle reminder. And the other thing that we forget is, like, just like you have the stress of the day, our kids have stress too. Absolutely. She had a day. She's probably doing online schooling. She probably had to listen to a bunch of, you know, directives and commands all day long. So she's also coming to the table with her own stuff. And we really underestimate that. We really do, because we could become so focused on our stuff that we forget that our little humans do have a life of their own, and that things that maybe don't seem like a big deal to us are a huge deal in their young world. So I think that's like what's so important about meeting them halfway, or meeting them where they are.
Yeah. I think that is such a valuable point, and something to think about that can be really hard sometimes in the moment to think about that. So I'm sure it takes practice to get to that space. So awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, we have 2 questions that came in. Hopefully we can go through these pretty quickly, and then I just want to make sure we get time for you to tell us all about how you can help us, because I know so many of us need it. So one of the questions that came in said, we need strategies for how to prevent a very active older child from distracting the younger one during mealtime. I'm curious if you have any thoughts on how to go about that.
So I'm just a really big fan of family meetings and I don't know the age of the older child, but I'm a big fan of family meetings, or, you know, talking with the older child separately, and coming alongside the child to say, gosh, you know what, I could really use your help with something. So in other words, it instead of giving a consequence to the older child for distracting the younger one, utilize the strengths of the older child, who is looking to connect, who's looking to feel significant, like they matter. And ultimately, kids love to help. They love to help. They love when their opinion is asked. And so I would approach the older child to say, you know, I noticed that meal times have been kind of hard. I've been yelling a lot, and your little brother or sister is like not eating, and that's getting, you know, here's what mealtime looks like. And I could really use your help with that. You know, are there any ideas that you have for how we can have a more calm mealtime, and how we can help your brother or sister, you know, eat more of their veggies, or, you know, whatever that is. So it's partnering with the older child, engaging their help, involving them in the situation, so they can feel that they're really part of that solution. So it's a very solution focused approach, rather than a more kind of consequence-based approach or punishment-based approach.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I think that just bringing them into it, I mean, it encompasses the whole positive parenting philosophy on having them be involved and giving them that autonomy to also help you come up with solutions too. Because I've noticed for my kids, that has been so helpful when we can sit down and say, well, what do you think is a good option? And even if we don't, use whatever her option is, they're still like involved in that planning piece. So, yeah. Thank you
And
for
like
that.
I said, kids love to help. And I think
Right.
that, one of them, it's so important, the messaging that we're giving, because, typically that older child might be receiving some negative attention for their behavior. And as far as our children are concerned, attention is attention, whether it's positive or negative. And our kids learn how to connect with us in these negative ways. So if we can reframe that and say to our child, the message that I trust that you'll have some good ideas to really help me out with this one, because gosh, I'm really stuck here. And I trust that you can, help us with this. I believe in you. So, and think about what that's like for a child to hear, especially a child who's been getting so much negative attention. It's like, wait, you believe in me? Wait, I have good ideas? Huh. Okay. And oftentimes they will rise to the occasion. We just have to be able to give them that opportunity.
Yeah. Very true. Very true. Thank you. And then the other question that came in, and I have a lot to say about this one, but I'm curious your thoughts as well. At dinner time, for a child who just like takes 2 bites and then says, I'm done. Like what would your approach be to that?
So probably like yours, and I'm also curious to hear yours.
Yeah.
I have a lot of questions. So,
Yes.
I find, there's a lot of questions, follow-up questions. So, one of the things I found, and I'm sure you find this in your experience all the time, one of the things that I've found when I talk with parents about this issue is that their kids are snacking a lot. So there's a lot of snacking going on. And so when there's a lot of snacking going on and then mealtime is served, the child's simply not hungry.
Right.
So like the 2 bites, it's like, okay, I know I'm going to satisfy your, need for me to eat. And I'm off to do my thing because, oftentimes, as we know, they have small stomachs and they fill up fast. And oftentimes they're not hungry. So I think one of the just practical things would be, and that's why I said I'd love to hear if you agree with this. Like one of the practical things is just to look at this, like how much snacking is going on, and really to minimize any snacking, and maybe just eating more frequently, or every like 3 hours or so.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. And so looking at the schedule and kind of the routine and making sure they are coming to the meal hungry. And the other thing that I want to say about this doesn't mention it, but in my mind, I'm thinking it's probably dinner time where this is happening. And I feel like a lot of what we're talking about, the behaviors, a lot of times it happens at dinner time when we've had the stress of the day, we're tired, they're tired, or we've been with our child all day, and it's such a hard time. So I always encourage parents to just, if your child takes 2 bites and they're done, then okay, that's fine. That's the end of your meal time, and you'll have another opportunity to eat. Maybe sometimes I encourage parents to do like a bedtime snack if there's time in between dinner or snack if they're worried about intake, or to even just think about the whole day, because even if a child doesn't eat that much at dinner, when again, it's like, what are our expectations for how much they should be eating at dinner? Maybe they had a big breakfast and then a couple like bigger snacks and then a lunch, and then like dinner time, it's just not a time where they're super hungry, and that's okay. That's like going back to the kind of that expectations. And then I do want to add just one more thing here. I'm always passionate about this, but sometimes I think when we create a meal for our kids, and usually it's dinner, we have so much pride in what we've created. So when they refuse to eat it, it feels like this blow on us. It feels very personal when it's not. And that's like going back, like check your expectations, check yourself, what you're feeling, and all of that. So,
yeah. And along with that, or related to that, what I love to do, especially when that's happening all the time, is involve your kids in creating the meal with you. So let them whip
Absolutely.
up lettuce, let them measure and pour, so that at least they're sort of involved in that process. And, they want that time with you anyway, because sometimes, even though we've spent all day with our child, there are times, if we really look at it, we're not spending this quality time where they're just getting 100% of our attention. And that's really what they're after. And so if you can fill up their cup and their bucket in that way, it does wonders for the relationship in general, as well as their behavior. But that's another thing that I found helpful, is just involve them in the process, right? Without the
Absolutely.
pressure that they have to eat. I think it's like you're saying, take that pressure off. I know there's a lot of, you have to eat 2 bites or 3 bites or 6 bites. And then that kind of leads to a lot of power struggles. So what you're really talking about is not taking it personally, right? That it's not a rejection of you and that amazing meal that you prepared and all the time that you spent on that. It's just more to do with your child and where they are temperament wise. And most of the time, these kids are like on the move. They're just
Absolutely.
on the move, right?
Yeah.
And that's okay. And that's okay. And remembering it won't always be like that, right? They won't always take 2 bites and get up. Eventually your children will be able to sit for a meal. Eventually your children will widen their palette of what they eat, right?
Yeah. I think one of the best pieces of parenting advice I got from a friend way when my kids were teeny tiny was that everything is a phase, and you go through these phases. You have the infant, you're not sleeping. It feels like it's going to last forever, but it's a phase, and like this too shall pass, and you shall move through it. So absolutely. So Debbie, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
This was incredible. I think you gave us some really like concrete things that, people can go home and try tonight at dinner time. So before we end, I want everybody to be able to find you. I know, first I want you to just tell us, I know you have a class coming up tonight, which is so amazing. So tell us about that and your upcoming course, and I'll make sure to link to all of these as well.
Thank you. So yes, I am offering a free webinar called I Wish My Kids Would Just Listen. And this is a webinar that I taught a couple of weeks ago, and it was really popular. And so I'm bringing it back and offering it again. So it's tonight, 8 p.m. Pacific time. It's going to be on Zoom. And that's free. And then also starting on Monday, I'm launching a course all on the topic of power struggles. So this is a course that I used to teach live, and now with the nature of the world, what I've done is I've taken it and made it so that it could be accessible for parents online. You can do it at your own pace. It's a 4-week class with a combination of weekly video lessons, written content. There's a digital and printable workbook and journal that goes along with it. And it's just jam-packed with helpful insights, as well as parenting tools and strategies to really support parents in gaining more cooperation at home and really reducing those power struggles. So that's really my passion, is helping parents with power struggles. It seems to become my specialty, and I just love talking about it. So I created a whole course on that, and that launches on Monday.
Awesome. And I know we can all relate to the power struggles, the kids not listening, and especially, as we're recording this, it's the time of COVID and the pandemic, and everything just seems to be heightened. So those are amazing offerings. I'm so happy that you're doing that.
Thank you.
And then just finally tell everyone where we can find you in general too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also work with parents individually. So if you're not interested in taking a class, or you need some more support or personalized attention, I do one-on-one parent coaching. That's really what I mainly do. So I have a Facebook page, Debbie Zeichner, LCSW Parent Coach. I'm on Instagram. I have a free group on Facebook as well. It's called Becoming an Empowered Parent. And that's, God, we're over 800 members in that group. So it's a really supportive environment. And where else can you find me? I think that's it. I think just the major social media channels is where I like to hang out.
Awesome. Yeah. So we'll link to all of that. Debbie, again, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you.
This has been so helpful, and I look forward to just kind of continuing to connect with you and to learning more from you.
Yes. Thank you. And thank you all for watching and taking this time out of your day just to listen and to be here. I really appreciate it. I'm grateful for all of you. So thank you. And I hope to see all of you